Hello. So in this video, I just want to go over some of the way I've been working with Claude, just as an overview. And then maybe in later videos, I'll show some details of how I've been working these compositions. But I think probably just from this kind of overview, you might get a lot of ideas for how to work with the LLMs, maybe on your own in a similar way. So when I first started working with Claude and Strudel, I would give it examples from Strudel and just ask it to fill in various code and various instruments and provide bits of code or bits of passages. And they never really sounded very good. And mostly it was dissonant and sort of noisy and didn't really match what my expectations were. And I think the problem was that I never really spoke about anything related to music ideas with Claude. And so I realized that once I started talking about things like melodies and chord progressions and four-part harmony and scales, Claude did a lot better because these LLMs have a really great understanding of musical ideas and music theory, it turns out. They know a fabulous amount about chords and chord families, and so they can understand the ideas from that point of view. And then if you use really straightforward notation, like the notation you're looking at here, then they are actually really good at kind of describing various elements within the composition. So what I did was the way I usually work is I build these steps in the composition that start at the top, and each little step is a stack of a few instruments that play at the same time. And so you can arrange these at the bottom with a function called arrange in Strudel. And basically what it will do is go through each of these stacks up there and play them one at a time as they go through. You can also put in a number here. This number right here tells you the number of times this stack is going to play or this layer is going to play. And so here what I have is 15 layers that all play one after the other in sequence like that. And then it goes around and starts back up at the top again. So you can put in, different numbers here instead of one if you want these stacks or these layers to play more than once. And so what I do with Claude is I start up at the top with the first idea as a stack, and then I have it fill in the steps down below. And I keep all of the previous steps in the file. One of the reasons for this is so that Claude has some version history and can look back at what we did earlier when we were building the piece out. And so in case anything gets messed up, also too, we just remove the latest step and go back and start over from the step previous to it. And also, I kind of came up with this little idea for just starting with four-part harmony in a way, and then asking Claude to create things like melodies and counter melodies and various kinds of structures related to that four-part harmony. So you see an example of that up here. There's four instruments. The first two instruments, and they're all pianos to start with, but there's four instruments. Each instrument has a certain number of notes. The first two have just four notes, and in Strudel, those four notes will play in one cycle. So the first two instruments here are chords, partial chords from the B-flat Lydian scale, which I don't really know what that is, but it turns out that Claude knows all the scales really well and can describe how, what their characteristics are, which ones are sad and which ones are happy and that kind of thing. But at any rate, I asked it for this little structure where there are four instruments and they harmonize and match for chords on each of these four notes in the first two, or four steps in the first two, but also for the last two, there's 12 steps. And in Strudel, those 12 steps will play in one cycle, just like the 4 steps up above for the 2 initial instruments. And so the the third and the fourth instrument here are harmonizing with the notes up above from the first 2 instruments on the first, the fourth, the seventh, and I guess that's the 10th, 11th, 12th, 10th step. And so it'll play, these 4 chords together, and then it goes on to making some changes to that. And so, for example, what I did to get the second step here was I asked Claude just to write in a melody, keeping with the chord structure that we have up above. And so it put in the intermediate notes there, which were rests originally in that first kind of setup up there. Claude calls these anchor points for these chords up here, but that's just a term that Claude dreamt up. I don't know what they are really, but I do know that starting with 4-part harmony and then trying to write your melodies to weave in to that structure is probably music composition 101, but I don't really know it very well, but I'm learning, it turns out, quite a bit by working with Claude this way, because it'll have some musical explanation for what we're doing, and then I'll go and do some research on it and learn quite a bit more. And I'll put some videos for just beginner music composition that I've watched that have been useful for me. But you can see how the stepwise work is done here. We go on and write a counter melody down here for the fourth instrument, and or a counterpoint, and then also I asked Claude this time to put in an extra instrument with kind of a descending sort of sound to it or melody to it. You can describe the melody in words to it and tell it, do you want steps or do you want leaps? Do you want it to rise and fall? You can describe the melody in whatever ways make sense, and Claude will adapt and kind of work with it. And usually what happens is it'll make some suggestion for a change, and if I don't like it, I'll ask it for something different, and it'll give me another example. And the great thing about working with LLMs is they can give you these examples really quickly, and so there's not a lot of time spent, trying to figure out how to go to the next step. In fact, Claude would write this entire piece, filling out the steps all at one go if it, if it had enough kind of basis for what it was you were trying to do. But at any rate, so I put in these various changes. Here's an example of one where there's some steps there, 12 steps, and then I had Claude put in some syncopation. And so I have a little set of syncopation rules in a text file, and I give it to Claude, and I say, these are the syncopations you can put in. And I try to stick with syncopations that don't destroy the harmonic structure. But you can do various, versions of this. And then you can go through and kind of drop in rests, a certain number of rests randomly as well, too, and also elongate various notes. And so you can make all kind of changes like that and, build up the structure of your piece. And so I'm just going to play it so you get the idea. And then in the next few videos, we'll come back and I'll actually show an example of each of these steps maybe and how I asked Claude for it. And we'll go through and maybe see if we can compose something similar to this as we go. I usually tinker with things a whole lot after Claude gives me some examples. I almost always have edits that I make on whatever changes the LLM proposes originally. And so it does take still a bit of time working if you really want to have more kind of control, for sure. But it works fabulously well, at least for me and my background, which is zero music knowledge. But now, because I've been working with Claude, I actually am learning quite a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and play it. And it may glitch a little bit, and I'll stop it if it glitches too much, because we're both recording and doing strudel. And so some of these pieces, sometimes, especially with these reverb on them, tend to kind of be glitchy a bit. So let's see if it will actually play okay. It's going to play once through. Usually what I do for the arrange part down here is I just comment everything out except for the step I'm working on, and then Claude writes in the next step, and then I go through and listen to everything that way. So let's play it and see. Yeah, good. So you can see what's going on and what the process is pretty clearly from this. And there's a lot of kind of repetition of code here, but it's sort of good in a way because it allows Claude to see exactly what happened in the previous steps. And it doesn't really have any problem, duplicating the layers like this. And if I ask it, for example, to change, part of a melody down here for an instrument, and then I just ask it to fix all the steps previous to that, it doesn't have any problem with that. It's not really a problem, but it looks like a lot of duplicated code, and maybe at the end you would clean it up, so that it doesn't drive you crazy. But it works really well, and so I'll try to show you some of the details in the next few videos.